time to bring you up to date with what is happening globally and in Nigeria. The headline says Putin suggests grenade blast in Prigozhin's plane. Bangladesh receives first Russian uranium. Putin says Ukraine vulnerable without Western aid. Racism taints Australian voice referendum, and Biden criticized for Texas border wall. Stay with me for these more stories. Vladimir Putin, Russian president, has suggested that the plane crash which killed the head of the Wagner mercenary force, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was triggered by the detonation of hand grenades inside the aircraft. On Thursday, Putin suggested that Prigozhin's plane was blown up from the inside, not hit by a missile as alleged, saying that the head of the Russia's investigative committee had reported that traces of explosives were found in the bodies of those who died in the crash in August. Fragments of hand grenades were found in the bodies of those killed in the crash, Putin told a meeting of the Valday Discussion Club in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. There was no external impact on the plane. That is already an established fact, Putin said, appeared to rubbish claims by United States officials who believe the plane was shut down. On August 23rd, the private Embraer jet on which Prigozhin was traveling to St. Petersburg crashed north of Moscow, killing all 10 people on board. Two other top Wagner figures, Prigozhin's 4 bodyguards and a crew of 3, were also killed. Putin did not give any more details about how a grenade or grenades could have been detonated on board the executive jet, but said he thought investigators were wrong not to have carried out alcohol and drug tests on the bodies of those who died in the crash. He also claimed that searches of Wagner's offices in St. Petersburg after the crash turned up to 10 billion rubles, that's $100 million in cash, and 5 kg, 11 pounds of cocaine. The detectives of the crash have yet to report publicly on their findings. Moscow rejected an offer from Brazil, where the Embraer business jet was built, to join the crash probe. The Washington, D.C.-based Institute for the Study of War, ISW, a think tank monitoring the conflict in Ukraine, described Putin's explanation for the crash as bizarre and planned to deflect blame from the Kremlin. The ISW said that Putin appeared to be sketching a scenario involving alcohol, drugs, and the mishandling of explosives by people on board the plane in an effort to blame the victims for their own deaths. The Russian president implied that the plane crash victims may have been using alcohol or drugs on board that could have led to the negligent handling of grenades that were presumably on board for some unexplained reason, the think tank said. The ISW added, Putin's bizarre explanation of the plane crash is likely an attempt to blame Prigozhin for his own and his comrades' deaths and to further disgrace him among his remaining supporters. Now, Bangladesh has gotten the first Russian shipment of uranium fuel for its first nuclear power plant, making it the 33rd country in the world to produce nuclear energy. The South Asian country is building the first of 2 nuclear power plants in partnership with Russian state-owned atomic company Rosatom. 90% of the $12.65 billion project is funded through a Russian loan repayable within 28 years with a 10-year grace period. The Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina said on Thursday, today is a day of pride and joy for the people of Bangladesh during a video conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin that the Russian embassy in Bangladesh called a nuclear fuel delivery ceremony. Speaking with Hasina via a video link, Putin acknowledged the International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA for supervising the project, which resulted from a bilateral agreement in 2011. IAEA head Rafael Grossi posted his congratulations on social media. Bangladesh stands as a success story for newcomer countries in nuclear power development, advancing its program under the IAEA's guidance, he said. Conclusion of the Rapor plant, located around 200 kilometers, 124 miles west of the capital Dhaka, has been revised many times due to construction being hindered because of COVID-19 pandemic curbs and the sanctions on Moscow following its invasion of Ukraine. The first unit of the plant, with a total generation capacity of 2,400 megawatts, was due to begin in operation in July next year, but that has been set back. Last month, Sergei Lavrov, the first Russian foreign minister to visit Bangladesh since 1971 independence, assured Bangladesh that Moscow was committed to finishing the project on time despite hindrances from Western sanctions over the work in Ukraine. Reports said the design and construction of the nuclear power plant is being carried out by the engineering division of Rosatom, and the plant will have a life cycle of 60 years with the possibility of extending its operations by 20 more years. Almost 1,500 of the 2,000 workers who run the plant once it is operational will be trained in Russia. Bangladesh has faced its worst electricity crunch since 2013, according to reports, due to erratic weather and difficulty in paying for fuel imports amid declining foreign currency reserves and a weakened national currency. Electricity generation in Bangladesh is currently dependent on imported gas, which has risen sharply in price since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. On Russia-Ukraine war, Russian President Vladimir Putin said without Western military and financial aid, Ukraine could not survive for over a week, a claim made on the same day as a European Union official cautioned that a bloc will not replace the funding gap if support for Kyiv from the United States dried up. Putin made his remarks on Western funding for Ukraine as fears grows that political chaos in Washington could jeopardize key military and humanitarian support that Kyiv needs to fight Russia's invasion. U.S. President Joe Biden admitted this week that he does worry U.S. support for Ukraine might get derailed. Speaking on Thursday at a meeting of the Valde Discussion Club, a Moscow-based think tank in the Black Sea resort of Sochi, Putin said that Ukraine was being propped up thanks to multi-billion donations that could come each month. Putin also claimed that Ukraine had lost over 90,000 troops since Kyiv's counteroffensive against Russian forces began in June. On Thursday, at a meeting of the European Political Community (EPC) in Spain, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said the EU could not replace the US as Kyiv's primary donor. The EU and the United States, together consisting of most NATO members, are vital in Ukraine's fight against Russia. The European Union and its member states have promised more than $100 billion in multi-year support to Ukraine, including financing weapon deliveries. Washington has committed $43 billion in military assistance, while Congress has approved $113 billion, which includes humanitarian support. But new U.S. funding for Ukraine has been put on hold as part of a weekend deal struck with opposition Republicans to avert a U.S. government shutdown. The removal by hardline Republicans of their own House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy this week has added to the uncertainty around aid for Ukraine. Some of the hardliners want U.S. aid to Ukraine to cease. Now on elections, days away from a historic referendum on indigenous rights in Australia, the racism that has flowed the campaign for weeks has deepened amidst flagging public support for the proposed constitutional voice to Parliament. A video was released on social media on Thursday showing a hooded man making a series of racist remarks against indigenous peoples before burning an Aboriginal flag and giving a Nazi salute. The man, who was unidentified, also singled out indigenous independent federal senator Lydia Thorpe, who has been subject to a barrage of online racism and at times death threats since she entered the political arena in 2020. The threats have worsened in the lead-up to the referendum scheduled for October 14th. People want to kill me out there. They don't want my voice to be heard, a visibly upset and angry Thorpe said at a press conference in response to the video. She railed against Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, accused the police of failing to protect her, and challenged those who sent the video. Controversially, Thorpe, who identifies with the Jabwurrung, Gunai and Gujranwala nations, is against the Voice, a Labour Party initiative which seeks to implement a constitutionally enshrined indigenous advisory body in the federal government. Thorpe instead advocates primarily for truth-telling and treaty as part of the Black sovereign movement that will also demand that indigenous deaths in custody be addressed as a priority. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden is under fire from both sides of the political spectrum after his administration declared fresh border wall construction in Texas. Biden has said he can't stop the work because the funding was signed off while Donald Trump was president. Members of his Democratic Party said walls did not work, while rival Republicans accused him of hypocrisy. The Department of Homeland Security has said there is an acute need for the barriers. U.S. authorities have detained over 2.2 million migrants this fiscal year alone. The rising numbers of migrants in U.S. cities such as New York have increasingly become a challenge for Biden, who has faced extreme criticism over his handling of the border. Funding for the new border barrier, first announced in late June, was appropriated during the 2019 fiscal year under Trump's presidency, according to U.S. officials and President Biden. Roughly 20 miles, 32 kilometers rather, of new border barriers will be built in Starr County, a sparsely populated stretch of border in the Rio Grande Valley. In 2020, Biden vowed he will not build another foot of wall if elected. On Thursday, a senior administration official laid the blame for the new construction on the U.S. Congress, claiming it resisted efforts to rescind the funds in Biden's first budget request issued in May 2021. Under a 1974 law, appropriated funds must be made available for the intended purpose unless a rescission is approved by both the Senate and House of Representatives. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said in a statement, "We have repeatedly asked Congress to rescind this money, but it has not done so, and we are compelled to follow the law." Biden and the statement stand in stark contrast to a notice about the project on the U.S. Federal Registry. In that, Mayorkas said there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers and roads in the vicinity of the border of the United States in order to prevent unlawful entries into the United States in the project areas. Here are more stories. No military aims in village hit by Russian missile. A top Ukrainian police official said there were no military targets in the village that was hit by a Russian missile strike on Thursday in what was one of the deadliest attacks against civilians since the conflict erupted, and which the country's president called inhuman and deliberate. Moscow's forces aimed a cafe and a shop in Rosa near the eastern Ukrainian city of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region with what Ukrainian officials say was a powerful Iskander ballistic missile, killing no less than 51 people, including a 6-year-old boy. Since a march of emergency workers wading through dense rubble in the aftermath of the strike, a scale of devastation not seen since the Russian attack on a railway station in Kramatorsk in early 2022 killed over 60 people. The death toll in such a small community of 330 people means 1 in every 6 residents were killed. All the people are local residents, all the people are civilians, not a single military object, not a single military vehicle. All the dead and wounded people are civilians, Sergei Bolvinov, the chief investigator with Kharkiv's regional police, said according to report. Investigators and forensic teams worked through the night sifting through the rubble and trying to count and identify the bodies, many of which were in bad condition due to the force of the blast, according to report. Bolvinov said the bodies of 35 victims have been identified so far. "I am convinced that in the future this will give us a basis to collect all the evidence and bring the guilty Russian military to justice," he said, adding that the attack was being investigated as a violation of the laws and customs of war. Fresh Russian strikes on the city of Kharkiv killed 1 child on Friday, whose body was found under the rubble of a residential building, according to the city's mayor, Ihor Terekov, who added that the strikes had been aimed exclusively at the civilian infrastructure. Ukrainian officials believe that the attack involved 2 Iskander ballistic missiles, the same kind used in the Rosa strike. Trump supports Jim Jordan as Speaker. Ex-President Donald Trump endorsed Ohio Rep. Jim Jordan's bid for the Speaker of the House on Friday. Trump said Jordan will be a great Speaker of the House and has my complete and total endorsement. His intervention into the race came after he expressed openness to temporarily serve in the role himself, and pastors familiar with discussions considered a visit to Capitol Hill to speak with Republicans in the coming days as they weigh a new Speaker. The former president is not anticipated to go to Capitol Hill, a source close to Trump said Thursday night. The Messenger first reported the internal discussions on a potential trip. Next Tuesday, Republicans are slated to hear from Speaker candidates at the forum next Tuesday, setting up the next possible House-wide Speaker vote on Wednesday, October 11th. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and Jordan have announced their candidacies, and others could still enter the race, but it remains to be seen whether the conference can coalesce around a viable successor to McCarthy. The vacancy leaves the House essentially paralyzed. In the meantime, Trump has been approached in recent days by GOP lawmakers who have floated the idea of him serving as Speaker, even on a temporary basis. One source familiar with the conversation said and has been intrigued by the idea. Trump has told those with him this week that while he is flattered and honored that people have raised his name, he is not seriously entertaining the idea, according to two people who have spoke with him about Kevin McCarthy's ouster. He is entirely focused on running for president, the two sources said, characterizing his public posturing on the narrative that he could be elected Speaker as Trump releasing the attention. In Africa shorts, Tunisian dissidents families head to ICC. Family members of imprisoned lawyers and politicians in Tunisia want the International Criminal Court ICC to probe claims of political persecution and human rights violations as a growing number of President Kais Saied's opponents are arrested and several in prison stage hunger strikes. The investigation is twofold. The family's lawyer said Thursday persons have been detained unlawfully, arbitrarily mistreated, in some cases tortured. They don't know what the charges are against them. The evidence hasn't been presented and there's no end in sight as to how long they will remain detained, Rodney Dixon said. Secondly, there has been a wave of brutal repression against black Tunisians and migrants in Tunisia. On May 24, 2023, members of the same group made a similar case to the African Court of Human and People's Rights seeking the immediate release of their loved ones. At that time, over 20 political opponents and other personalities had been arrested in action that has been roundly condemned by the international community and rights groups. That number has surged throughout the months. Yusra Ghanouchi, the daughter of jail opposition leader Rachid Ghanouchi, joined other jail dissidents' sons and daughters in The Hague to announce plans to pursue action at the court. Now, more stories coming your way from Nigeria. Please do stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. Talking Tinubu's certificate saga, Tinubu's Chicago certificate, Atiku calls for justice. Yesterday, Atiku Abubakar, presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, said it will be a fight to a finish with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC. Coming 7 months after the February 25th elections in which he finished second, Atiku said his legal battle to expose the mysteries surrounding the certificates of President Tinubu was to make sure that ground rules for legitimate governance are upheld. At a crowded press conference in Abuja 2 days after the deposition by the Registrar of Chicago State University, CSU, Caleb Westberg, of Tinubu's academic records at the United States U.S. Court, the ex-vice president solicited the support of Labour Party's presidential candidate Peter Obi and New Nigeria People's Party NNPP's counterpart Rabiu Kwankwaso to join his quest for justice in the certificate saga involving President Tinubu and in establishing legitimate governance in the country, pointing out that the reputation of Nigeria is at stake. Atiku had requested the release of President Tinubu's certificate from CSU over suspicion that the certificate the former Lagos State governor submitted to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) may not be genuine. He has promised not to stop the fight until the Supreme Court gives judgment, alluded to some cost he had to bear while fighting for the legitimacy of government in the country. We undertook this journey at the great cost and for important reasons. The ground rules for a legitimate governance in our country need to be upheld, and the reputation of our country is at stake. That affects everyone, Nigerians everywhere, he said. Atiku gave special thanks to persons who had fought for true and transparent democracy. I should thank the lawyers both in Nigeria and in the United States who have assisted us in bringing clarity and definitive answers to these issues that appear to have defied our institutions for nearly a quarter of a century. I also want to extend my gratitude to Nigerian citizens and friends of Nigeria, both within and beyond the shores of our country, for their patience as we have sought to find the facts and establish the truth. While Tinubu and his supporters have continually denied the accusations, Atiku said he will continue to seek justice over the matter. The ruling All Progressives Congress APC, reacting to the controversy, said it is unfazed by Atiku's comment that Tinubu does not deserve to be president of Nigeria. APC's National Public Secretary Felix Morka, in a statement, argued that Atiku lacked purpose and delivered nothing except what he termed the pitiful regurgitation of lies, mindless distortions, and deliberate falsehood on his infantile obsession with the academic record of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu. And finally, on the news, WTD, Nigeria educators decry neglect. Yesterday, Nigeria teachers joined their counterparts worldwide to mark this year's World Teachers' Day, WT Day, lamenting their plight at the three tiers of government. They precisely decry the failure of national and subnational governments to fulfill their pledges to teachers in the country. Through the Nigeria Union of Teachers NUT National President, Comrade Audu Titus Mba, appealed to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to do something differently, activating the teacher policy reforms of the past administration and implement the teachers' incentives approved in 2020. The administration of ex-President Muhammadu Buhari on the occasion of the 2020 World Teachers' Day announced the approval of far-reaching welfare packages for teachers, which include the special salary scale for teachers in basic and secondary schools, reintroduction of bursary award to education students in universities and colleges of education. Others were free tuition and automatic admission for biological children of teachers, special teachers' pension scheme to enable the teaching profession retain its experienced talents, as well as to extend teachers' retirement age, development of a career path policy for teaching profession in Nigeria, building of low-cost houses for teachers in rural areas, and provision of low facilities for agriculture, housing, cars, motorcycles, and others to support teachers' earnings, amongst others. The union observed with disappointment that 3 years after, the approved inducements for teachers were largely untackled. They therefore called Tinubu to activate the teacher policy reforms of the past administration by making sure the full implementation of the teacher incentives approved in 2020. Amba spoke at a special event organized to celebrate the teachers in Abuja yesterday. He urged the federal government through the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission, NSIWC, to issue a circular for wage search to reflect on the positions and pensions of retired teachers and other workers. To refresh our memories, Putin suggests grenade blast in Prigozhin's death. Bangladesh receives first Russian uranium. Putin says Ukraine vulnerable without Western aid. Racism taints Australian voice referendum, and Biden criticized for Texas border wall. That's all on the news. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Chiraki. Have a great weekend.